Good morning. You're listening to Insurance Matchmaking, your path to health, life, and Medicare coverage with Matt Libby Insurance. And now, sharing his knowledge, here's your host, Matt Libby.
All right, good morning. Welcome back to Insurance Matchmaking. Actually, I was listening to the radio as I was driving in and still talking about people being without power after the snow and ice storm we had. So here in Cookeville, actually, we didn't have it that bad, but I do have a little saga to share on that. We had heat problems. Our furnace just decided on Friday night that the blower motor was not going to work. So we had to call in an emergency repair, and Jackson Heating Cooling came by, had a tech come by and got my very almost dead blower motor to work, got it working, thought it would last for a couple weeks, and I got up in the morning and it wasn't running. That was on Saturday morning, and so I turned everything off, let it set for an hour or two, turned it back on, got it going, and had to do that a few times throughout the day on Saturday. Sunday, kind of the same thing. Got up Monday morning, and the resetting just didn't work. The blower just wouldn't go. I mean, the furnace would light and everything, but the fire would, eventually go out because the blower wouldn't, cool the. Again, I'm not a heat and air guy, but the blower wouldn't distribute the heat, so it has to cut itself off, or you're gonna have a fire start in your furnace. But I mean, not a fire that you don't want in your furnace, because it's one that would spread. Fortunately, what happened was when he worked out on Friday night was, of course, everybody's got to, it's always that thing of especially when you have an older unit and it's unique. And so it wasn't like a standard fit for the blower. So he needed another bracket to be able to replace the blower, which was able to do that on Monday. So as I'm recording here today, our heat's working fine. Hopefully this blower, and actually it's working great. So I think this blower is probably going to carry us through the winter, and then maybe in the spring, go ahead and change out that unit. It's like 25 years old. It's probably not a bad time to change it. And our AC unit is not as old as the furnace, but the last time we had it serviced, they said, probably the next time if we have to come out and service again, it will probably require replacement. So we probably will just replace our entire heating and cooling system this spring, and hopefully then that will last us into, as we say, our golden years, since we've already kind of started in those golden years. So that was our saga with the weather. Other than that, we did fine. It never got real cold in the house, because it would shut off and we'd have to wait for it, and it would get down in the lower 60s, and then we get it cranked back up to 69, and that would last for a while. We did have a little space heater we took in the bedroom. The bedroom stayed warm that way, and even the house, even Monday morning when I couldn't get everything going, I think the lowest it ever got. Now, this is upstairs. The basement probably was colder, but it only got down to like 59. So with sweaters and blankets, we managed. And I'm just saying that I was coming in feeling for some of the people, they said, that still have power out in the in the northern parts of the upper Cumberland, and, sending out prayers for those folks, and hopefully they can get their power back on and get their heat going, because it's one of those things. I love having a gas furnace. I don't want a heat pump, but the downside of a gas furnace is you still have to have electricity. Doesn't take as much electricity as a heat pump or your air conditioning unit, but you have to have electricity to power that fan, or the heat won't work. I miss having my wood stove. We had a storm like this back in the early 90s in Clarksville, and we didn't have power for a couple days. Unfortunately, I think we never went 24 hours without power, but it would come and go, so the house stayed cold. And so we had a wood stove put in, and oh my goodness, that was great to just you know, we didn't ever use our heat. In fact, the electric company actually ended up having to pay us back money because we'd gone on budget billing, and before we had the stove, and it was like, and then at the end of the year, it was like we had paid more for our electricity than we used, so they had to actually give us a credit. I can't remember if they paid us back or gave us a credit and readjusted for the next year, but it saved a lot of money. So that's kind of my saga there. And so I'm a strong proponent of having a wood stove. Saw a good video yesterday talking about, you don't really have to have a generator. As long as you have an inverter and hook it up to your car battery, you can run, maybe a couple extension cords or something and keep your refrigerator going. And again, if you have an electric furnace, you can hook the power to that because it's not going to run all the time. It won't run your battery down immediately. you will need to occasionally probably go out, start up the car, recharge the battery. And one of the things in the video he was talking about, he's like, car actually runs quieter than a generator. So there are ways that you can get power even in a power outage, and you can charge your phones. Everything uses electricity these days. But and I know this doesn't have a lot to do with insurance, but they're just kind of going down a rabbit hole here. But the one thing is if you can keep that gas furnace, if you can get a little bit of electricity to it just so it runs, then that would definitely keep your house warm, and it won't run the car battery down that quick, because it really doesn't take a lot of electricity to run your gas furnace. Now, if you have a heat pump, you're probably going to need a generator because you need full power to keep that running. And that's where, again, a wood stove can be really handy there. Just speaking from my experience. So anyway, one of the things I thought about, I wanted to talk about today is, and let me preface this with, I am not a tax preparer. I'm not a tax professional. So if anything that I'm saying that comes out as income tax related is just kind of based on my own experience and general knowledge. I am not giving tax advice. That being said, a few weeks ago, I think I mentioned, and if you were listening, that I kind of got in trouble on a Facebook post. Wasn't paying attention to the fact that I was operating as from my business page, which is just, if you don't have a business page, you may not understand. But on Facebook, if you have a business like I do, you can set up your business page. It is attached to your personal page. You actually have to have a personal Facebook page to get that business page. But when you're on that, when you're posting things, you're posting as your business. You'll get things in your news feed just like you do in your personal news feed. And I commented on a discussion about minimum wage, and didn't realize I was posting as my business. And oh my gosh, you'd have thought I was the devil. That I'm mistreating all my employees and I only pay minimum wage. And it was like, that wasn't what I was saying at all. There's a couple different approaches to minimum wage, and I'm probably going to set some people off here. I wish we could just abolish minimum wage, because the phrase they like to use, it's not a living wage. And I'll agree with you on that. I mean, nobody can get by on just earning minimum wage, but that doesn't mean everybody needs to be paid more. And the thing is, they want to raise minimum wage. Well, guess what happens when you raise minimum wage? Who's ever working at minimum wage, they're still broke. So, currently ours is at $7.25. I don't know many places, or if there is anywhere. I don't know of anybody trying to hire somebody at $7.25. Now, of course, I'm going to go into this a little bit too. Your food servers, I know, getting minimum wage or less than minimum wage. And I can say I've actually worked for minimum wage. I've mentioned on here before, I used to sell cars. And in the car business, you get what's called a draw. And that draw is basically so you can have gas money to get to work, but it comes off of your commission. So when you sell some cars and get commission, then the first part of that draw or that commission is paying back your draw. So when I was in the car business, we worked at minimum wage. That's what we got paid. And then hopefully you sold enough to get out of the bucket. So you were always working to earn that commission, but if you had a bad week or a bad month, all you made was minimum wage. So I understand working for minimum wage. Another thing I did that was minimum wage, and which I didn't mind because to me it was still worth it, was, and I've talked about it maybe a couple times here on the show, but when I lived in East Tennessee, I got the opportunity to be an usher at the UT football games. And what they did there, we had to show up 2.5 hours before the game started because we had to be able to get in and be set up before they started letting people in, because I think they would open the gates at like 2 hours before game time. So we had to be in position. So we had to get there 2.5 hours before the game started, and they would pay us minimum wage for 5 hours. You were welcome to stay until the end of the game, or you could leave in the middle of the second quarter, at least the middle of the third quarter. If it was a blowout, a lot of times we would leave, once it was the time that we were allowed to leave. But we got minimum wage for 5 hours and basically a voucher to get a Coke and a hot dog. And hey, and you got to watch the game You didn't have to pay to watch the game, so it was like getting a free ticket. So we enjoyed it, but it was a commitment too. It's like if you weren't, if you only showed up for 2 games out of the season, well, you might not get asked back the next season. So you tried to make every game, but that was minimum wage. So I understand what it's like to work minimum wage. When I was in high school, I worked minimum wage. I worked at a McDonald's, and I did that for less than a year because I was able to get a job and work in a supermarket. And one of the things, and that's going to kind of lead into my second part of what I want to talk about today is tipping. And it'll make sense, and I'll bring this, I will bring this into where it kind of applies insurance. It sounds like I'm just trying to do a political speech, and I'm not. I apologize for that. But it does impact the people I work with. And I've learned things in doing this business that and realize that a lot of people just don't get the advice when it comes to how you handle your taxes, how you earn, how you handle your wages, whether you move on to another job. And I do know, back long before I was in the health insurance business, I did work at in a factory, and it was a union factory, and so they had to handle things like with layoffs. They had to hire back when they called people back from layoffs. They had a seniority system there that who got called back first. And I know people who actually didn't mind getting laid off. They didn't want to work overtime. They just wanted to come in to get the job because that's how they got their health insurance, because this was long before the Affordable Care Act. And so they would take their layoff, and then because once they got laid off, they lost the insurance. So they hoped that layoff period wasn't that long. But I know a guy had a flooring business. He made good money. He did not need the job. That's why he didn't want the overtime, but he wanted it for his health insurance. So that was back about the only way you got health insurance was you either had buy your own health insurance or you had it highly subsidized by your employer. And of course, pre-existing conditions came into play there. So if you got laid off and you didn't have, and I think this is even before they had, maybe we had COBRA back then. But, some people wouldn't take it because now you're paying full price for it, and everybody felt that was too expensive, which is one of the reasons why the so-called Affordable Care Act came about, because people assumed that anything outside of employer insurance was not affordable. And actually, when I look at it now and what insurance premiums are like now, for most people, it was affordable. Now, those with pre-existing conditions who didn't keep a continuous insurance, yes, the Affordable Care Act helped fix that, but I think they could have fixed that without doing everything they did with the Affordable Care Act. There could have been another way to kind of maybe help insurers and help people get insurance. But looks like we're coming up on the break here, so we'll do the commercials, and then I'll kind of continue on this and then get into what I was going to talk about with the how the tip culture fits into what I'm talking about.
It's a new year, and it's time to drop old habits like slow internet and bad cell service. Make 2026 a year for better connections with Tri-Lite. Get gig speed connectivity at home and crystal clear wireless wherever you roam, all backed by the friendly and local Tri-Lite team. Bundle to save and start the new year right with Tri-Lite. Better internet, better wireless, better year. To learn more, call 833-847-0824 or visit trilite.net.
Dreams made real. It's more than a slogan, it's a mission. Join Upper Cumberland Habitat for Humanity for the first ever White County Dream Builders Luncheon on February the 10th from 12 to 1 p.m. at Life Church in Sparta. Be part of a powerful hour that supports affordable housing right here in the Upper Cumberland. General admission is just $20 or elevate your impact as a $250 table host. Scan the QR code on our social pages to purchase tickets. The White County Dream Builders Luncheon, February the 10th at Life Church in Sparta.
And now, back to Insurance Matchmaking with Matt Libby Insurance.
All right, welcome back. Please support our advertisers. That's helped keep us on the radio here. So I was talking about, having employer insurance and minimum wage. And reason I say, like some people would stay at a job that was like barely above minimum wage because it did have benefits. And then other people are like, I'm going to go where they actually pay me something and I'll worry about the other things myself. And there's a lot of people did that. But I wanted to address the tipping culture, and I brought up kind of some of my work history. Now, of course, most of my adult life I was in the Army, so I kind of got away from some of the stuff. But I did work, as I mentioned, I did work at McDonald's in high school. And actually kind of interesting, we had one McDonald's in our county, and our county maybe had 50,000 residents. So if you kind of look at, how big Cookeville is and how many McDonald's, and we got another one going up on North Washington, how many Starbucks are there in town, all these little franchise things. We didn't have all those things. And the reason I bring that up, don't get me started on the coffee shop tipping concept, because it kind of goes back to, and I've shared on here before. I know we've got newer listeners now since we switched from the news talk to Grace 107. But I lived in a store. Literally, the first 10 years of my life lived in a little mom and pop country store. Pumped gas, full service. Check the tire pressure, check the oil, wash the windshield, and pump the gas. And I did all that when I was a kid, and it always kind of got me listening. They say you have to have a driver's license. You have to be at least 16 to be able to pump gas. And it's kind of like I was pumping gas when I was 5. So it just kind of blows my mind that you have to be at least an older teenager to know how to pump gas. And the funniest thing is I kind of just read as a story when I was in the Army. We were out in the field, and they'd had a fuel truck come around because we had generators to run a lot of our power equipment. And so diesel truck would come by, and we'd have to put the diesel in the tank of this big 60 kilowatt generator. And I had this, I started saying employee. I didn't have employees, but the soldier in my squad. And I said, here, get up there and put the diesel in, fuel this generator. He's like, I don't know how to do that. I'm from New York. I've never pumped gas. He didn't drive. And if you've ever been to New York, people, they take cabs, they take the subway. They don't, a lot of people from New York don't drive. And I said, see that thing there? Stick it in that hole and squeeze that handle. Because that's all he had to do, because the guy driving the truck was running the pump. He just had to put the nozzle in and didn't know what to do. So I get it. So, some people shouldn't be pumping gas. But the reason I bring that up was, I did full service at the gas station as a kid. I never got a tip for that. Never crossed my mind. I worked at McDonald's, and to this day, you do not tip at McDonald's. So why do you tip at a coffee shop? I get tipping servers. I understand that when in the restaurants, it's like, yes, you should be tipping your servers because they are getting paid low wages, which, again, I'm not going to get too deep into what I think we should do there. I think we should, because I don't think we can go back and change it. Like you go to Europe. I lived in Europe. It's like, the old story that say people would leave their money on the table as a tip, and the waitress would chase them down the street to give them their money back because they thought they forgot it. Everybody, if you're ever stationed in Europe, you've probably heard that story. I don't think it happens as much now. I think, especially with movies and internet and things like that Europeans have a little bit more understanding of tipping culture in the U.S. But in Europe, it was different. Now, you could tip, but it generally was just kind of a rounding up. We did everything in cash. Nobody had debit cards back then. But they would bring you the bill in, say it's, and I'll just use American numbers, but say it's $18.50. So maybe you just hand them a 20 and say, keep the change, take the rest. So that's typical tipping. And again, and it's not expected, but if you had really good service, you want to give them a little something extra you did. And again, they got paid a decent wage. They got paid, the same as anybody else. So getting a little tip that, that, as we say, that was gravy. But the reason I wanted to bring up about the tipping is here's a concept I have, and I don't know, we may get some calls on this. We may get emails. At least I know you're listening if you do. I tip on my credit card. I know a lot of people say, oh, they want cash. They want to be able to spend that cash. Yes, I do. I understand that. I understand why they want the cash, because part of it is they do not want to report the tips or all their tips on their income tax. So if they're getting cash tips, they can just especially if they get a very generous tip, they only have to tip a certain amount to say they did it. Or, there's others, some places, and I don't like this concept. I get it. I do. I kind of understand it too. So don't restaurant people, don't shoot me. Is, you have to tip out the busboy and the cook and the dishwasher out of your tips. Yeah, I don't know. It's like, again, those people are generally getting a higher hourly wage than the server. Bartenders, again, a little different there. They are kind of paid like as servers, but the cooks get, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but cooks get paid. They're paid an hourly wage that's generally going to be above minimum wage. But the reason I say I put it on the credit card is I want those servers reporting their tips on their taxes, and it's not because I am such a nasty, dirty conservative. No, it actually really it is related to what I do in the insurance business. And one of the things with the Affordable Care Act is you have to have a minimum income to qualify for the subsidy. I've gone over this a few times, but you have to be at 100% of the poverty level to earn to be eligible for the subsidies. Well, that's currently now right around $16,000 a year. So $1,000 a month or $1,100 a month is not going to qualify you to get the subsidy anymore. At one time it did. And that's still kind of the cutoff, I think, where when it comes to qualifying for TennCare. It may be a little higher now. I haven't really looked into, the per month, how much you can earn per month and qualify for TennCare. But here's the situation. I've had people who worked in the restaurant business, were servers, and they'd come to me and it was like, and they were, well, I make $900 a month, and they wouldn't qualify for a subsidy. They needed a couple more $1,000 a year, and that's the thing. It wasn't that much more, and I just look at them and I was like, just report more of your tips. We're going to put down back then we could say we have to say you make at least $12,000, so we put $12,000 and say just report more of your tips, because you need to hit, when you go to file your income tax to keep that subsidy to pay for your health insurance, you need to hit that minimum income. Now, trust me, being just barely above 100% of poverty to qualify for the subsidy for your health insurance, what you're paying, reporting extra in income, you're going to get more than that back on not paying full price for your health insurance. The other thing is, if you're below $15,000, I think that somewhere around that cutoff is, if your income is below that, anything that you've had withheld for your taxes, you're going to get back anyway. Now, granted, some of that, what goes into Social Security, no, you're not getting that back, but that's the other reason that I bring that up, because what you draw from Social Security when you hit that age, it has a lot to do with how much you've paid in. Or if you do end up on disability prior to age 65, and you're going to be living off of that disability check that you earn, and the way they figure the disability is, and I don't know if it goes to full retirement age or just age 65, the computation of, if you were still working at the rate at the wage you're earning now, this is what you would qualify for when you turn 65. So if your income is below a certain amount that you're reporting, you're not going to get much on your disability. So believe it or not, reporting more income, so you're actually paying a little bit more into Social Security. If something happened like disability, you're going to get more on your disability because you reported more on your taxes. The other is, like I said, having that minimum income to qualify for that tax credit. So you're actually, if you're putting your tip on your credit card, you're actually helping that individual in the long run. Yes, they may not have as much cash in their pocket today, but in the long run, and that's why I say, that's why I may cause a little controversy here, but that's why when I tip, I prefer to tip on my credit card, because I want to be sure that I look at it as I'm helping that person set up their finance to be a little bit better when they're my age or a little bit older. And it kind of goes back, I was talking about in the first half, they're talking about, working at McDonald's. We only had the one. And to show you how old I am, we didn't have a playground. We did not have a drive-through. And we didn't serve breakfast. So I think some of the things when it comes to the tipping culture that we're in today, our millennials and some of our younger Gen Xers, they don't know anything else other than a McDonald's on every corner, seems like. And I know I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but that was common. You know, it was in the 80s that we started the term the soccer mom, because everybody was playing soccer and moms were running everywhere, you know, picking up the kids, dropping off the kids, and drive-thrus were very convenient, and so they kind of exploded. And so we needed a lot of that. And traditionally had been low wage people. You know, like I said, I worked there in high school. I can remember showing up after school to work, and that's when the day shift people were leaving as we came in. And it was a couple, I want to say little old ladies, you know. Well, they were old to me. I was in high school, and they may have been in their 50s. I mean, I don't think they were much older than that, but, you know, it was a part-time job, and you know, they didn't get paid a lot, but it supplemented their household income. And then they had all us high school kids to work there in the evening when we were busier. You know, evenings, weekends, and then of course the summer, we would work. We were busy all day, and so I can remember it. And we always had a lunchtime rush during the summer, and I'm sure there's probably still kind of a lunchtime rush. But that was how it worked. I learned a lot. I learned the old phrase: "If there's time to lean, there's time to clean." That gets used in a lot of industries. But where I first learned it was when I was working at McDonald's in high school. But I understand it, and it's just. But we didn't work for tips. When I mentioned the supermarket, I went there. I was a bag boy. We weren't allowed to accept tips. A couple times people would sneak me a tip, but as a general rule, we didn't tip. It was all, but we were paid very well. It was actually a union job. That may be a story for another show. Report your tips. Make sure you're earning enough to get the tax credit, because then it makes the insurance affordable. Granted, it's not very affordable if you're not getting the tax credit. So we will look forward to talking to you next week, and hopefully next week everybody will have their power back on. And keep listening to Grace 107.7. Remember, at Matt Libby Insurance, we can cover you from head to toe. It doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg. And please go to insurancematchmaking.com. You can find the past shows that are on YouTube. Leave me a comment on there. You know, tell me something you'd like to hear me talk about, or debate with me. I'd love it. You know, as long as we can have an adult conversation and not get nasty, I'd love to debate. You know, maybe you have a different opinion on what I shared today. Talk to you next week.
You've been listening to Insurance Matchmaking with Matt Libby, your path to health, life, and Medicare coverage with Matt Libby Insurance.